Hi, good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for coming this evening. Our topic this evening is Iran because we've watched in horror at some of the video that's come out of the country of protesters being gunned down and estimates, anywhere from 7,500 to 35,000 dead, which is a terrible, terrible situation. And where is it going? Is it moving towards a secular democratic state? Is it going to still be a theocratic state when all this is finished? Obviously, as Republicans, we are for whatever the people of Iran are for. I mean, we don't want them to be infiltrated and taken over by outside influences. Anyway, we've got two speakers going to speak with us tonight. So I'm going to go to Aghileh first, and the second speaker is Hamid. So I'm going to go to Aghileh first to speak to us about the situation in Iran.
Very much, Carol, and thank you for inviting me. But an actually very wise decision to have me first and then Hamid second, because Hamid is much better informed, and by the virtue of having lived in Iran fairly recently, he has much better connections. So I'm going to try and be as short as I possibly can so that Hamid can have longer time. But I want to start with um, offering condolences and solidarity to all the Iranian families who have been affected by this. I was speaking to someone in Iran, and they said there's barely any family in Iran that has not been affected by this current protests, and so it is a quite a big deal. You can see it on social media. The trauma is very, very real, and it actually kind of reminds me of during the 8 year war of between Iraq and Iran. And I think I don't know, it would be interesting to see what Hamid thinks, but I think something as traumatic as this, you would have to go that far back to kind of for people to experience, because it I would say this has been something that has been a collective experience. And although we had um the 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 12-day war between Iran and Israel, I think that was very different in its nature, because it was an external threat. To be killed by an external entity is very different to have your child or your young person leaving their house, and then for you to then later on find out that they will never come back again. So I would like to start with that. And I really hope that I'm speaking on behalf of you all, because and I kind of have a little bit of a sympathy for it. There's a lot of, the left has been somewhat silent on the issue, and I understand the hesitancy, and I have a little bit of sympathy for it. But I think it's really, really important for the left to communicate the outrage. And so I can tell you one of my own experiences is that many friends during the 12-day war, English or kind of British friends during the 12-day war called me. In fact, I found out on the day, because I was at work and I was just busy working on the day that it happened. I found out through friends texting me and asking me how my family was. That's how I found out that Israel had attacked Iran.
Mm.
Um, and actually, on this, I have not had a single person asking me how my family is. And I think it's just that hesitancy of not knowing what is the right thing and how I might or might not feel about it. So I just wanted to share that personal experience with you. One thing that I think is really important, I don't know many of you, unfortunately, I don't know what your background is on Iranian and Middle Eastern politics. But I think one thing that is really, really important to understand about the Iranian people is that this is a country that is incredibly capable, incredibly well educated. The women are incredibly fierce, and it has achieved in the past 150 years, it has achieved many, many things. And we have had three big revolutions, and no matter how you look at these revolutions, and the latest one being the 1979 revolution that led to the Iranian, what we have as the Iranian regime currently, all of these revolutions have been as a result of massive struggle, and the Iranian people have stood up against tyranny. And I think it's really, really important to recognize that, and that historical context is really, really important to think that, Iranian people are not these people that we need to save. I think we will do Americans and British people and all of the West would do a better job trying to save themselves from their own empires rather than focusing on trying to save Iranians. Iranians are more than capable of saving themselves. I just want to go back to what happened as it started the latest uprising. So in Iran, it's not an unusual thing for people to demonstrate, to stand up, because there are a lot, particularly in the last few years, where the sanctions from America have really hit the Iranian economy incredibly hard. To the extent that even if you're rich, so for instance, if you're a cancer patient and even if you're rich, you still will struggle with particular cancer drugs. So it's not even, it goes beyond being rich and poor. There are some things that everybody is hit in the same way. I mean, and obviously, as we all know, in terms of the class struggle, when the rich are hit, the poor are hit 10 times, 100 times more. And it is not unusual in an Iranian family to see people who have not had meat or chicken or any kind of type of protein for months on end. So these are not on, these are kind of completely understandable times. So the Bazaar of Tehran specifically, the Iranian rial fell again massively and it had a crash, and the Bazaris had a demonstration. And the Bazaris are not progressive people in any way, shape, or form. I don't think anyone would describe them as such. And you can see from the response of the Iranian government that they are not either, because they sat down, they negotiated with them, they met the leaders. This is not something that happens in Iran frequently, that the leaders of demonstrations or whatever will sit down with the government to have discussions. I mean, in general, they don't happen anywhere, but in Iran in particular, it really does not happen that there are negotiations with the government, with demonstrators. But the government did, and they thought that they had calmed things down. And but then actually that I think gave other people the impetus, the power to kind of say, right, enough is enough. This is, maybe we should all do it together. And I mean, the timelines are slightly confusing and it's not very clear, but both, and then when did this happen? Between the CIA and Mossad, definitely there had been some encouragements of some elements within the demonstrators. So this did happen. So, but I'm also very reluctant. So what I would like to say is that those demonstrating have very real issues and they are demonstrating for just cause. And whether they have been played by external forces or not, for me, that's neither here nor there. It is unbearable to live in Iran right now, and it is unbearable to be a young person in Iran right now. I mean, from some Iranians, you also have this idea of describing Iran as a concentration camp or Gaza, but I mean this is not. I personally would say that this is not a particularly helpful language. Concentration camp, Gaza, they have very particular definitions. No, Iran is not a concentration camp. Iran, it's not like living in Gaza. I certainly don't believe that. And when you speak to people, people don't believe that. However, these were the language. So so the West wanted to use that kind of language to topple the regime, if you like, despite the fact that they saw that during the 12-day war, that wasn't very successful. It just didn't happen because I think Iranians always, when there is some external actor that enters the equation, it often happens that they retreat because the enemy, the outside enemy, becomes always more important because up to this date, and these are all moving goalposts, but up to this day, Iranians, for most Iranians, they the entity of Iran, the country, they but for the country to stay together, that these are things that really makes most Iranians scared. Not all Iranians, I have to recognize that, but most Iranians, for them, it's really important that Iran remains as one unit. So very quickly, unfortunately, for progressive forces in Iran, these demonstrators were hijacked by Israel and America, and the discourse, particularly online, was around those things. And what is really interesting that Iran International, which is a exile TV station based in Saudi Arabia, but for the most part funded by Israel, was basically had become a mouthpiece even more than usual for the son of the despoted Shah of Iran. And this man who in 47 years, I was really shocked. In 47 years, he has no political credibility. He has done nothing. And also actually but by many, he has been described as someone that in 47 years, he has not done anything positive in his life. And it's very difficult to describe somebody's, you don't want to describe someone's life as having no meaning. But actually, in terms of Iran, or in terms of trying to have some sort of an achievement, he really does not have any credibility whatsoever. I was quite shocked for the first time in my life to find out that he actually doesn't even have a university degree. Not that a university degree is here or there, but I was genuinely quite shocked because he comes from an incredibly privileged background. And as we speak, he is staying on in a very expensive, like one of these super rich resorts that it's just completely inappropriate given the given context of the Iranian people in general, but the given context of people after having had 7,000 of them, mainly young people, killed. So it's really important to understand that. But then but then there was two elements to this. There was social media that was cut in Iran, and the regime effectively put everybody in Iran under house arrest, if you like, because if you don't have access to social media, how do you communicate? So WhatsApp, everything just disappeared. And it was, and then on the other hand, in the West, there was a pumping of all these pro-Pahlavi sentiments going on, and so on and so forth. And it was what was quite shocking for me, and it has been, I am more and more shocked by it. I I recognize Iran is a country like many others, and there's racism, and so you would see, and I'm not oblivious to the fact that we have racism as well as much as any other country, but I really had not seen fascistic slogans in Iran until this very moment. And I am very, very sad, but and in some ways sad, but in other ways happy to see that most of that was coming from Iranians outside of Iran rather than Iranians inside of Iran. Again, this is all kind of observational. I haven't done any, I don't want to, I don't want to say things. I don't have any evidence for that. I haven't done any studies. I haven't looked up any studies, and I don't think there's anything available. Perhaps Hamid might know something about that. But it got to a point where I really wanted to attend some demonstrations, but I just could not see myself being present in demonstrations where there were flags of Israel being carried. As a person who is pro-Palestinian rights, and I have been attending as many demonstrations as I could have in the last couple of few years, I could not see myself. So it actually, what it did do for me personally, and I think for a lot of other Iranians, it took away the ability for us to grieve collectively, because a lot of people like me refuse to attend these demonstrations. So luckily in Paris and in Berlin, where there's a lot of organized left Iranians exist, and lots of other progressive parties, there were pro Iranian people pro their pro their right anti-Iranian regime, but also in a progressive way, in an inclusive international way. There were demonstrations in Paris and Berlin, but in London, the majority of demonstrations were organized with from the remnants of Pahlavi regime, and this was, obviously for people like me, that was, it's completely unbearable, because when people talk about, it presents a whole generation, my father's generation, as a bunch of mad people who went to sleep one night and woke up, and in a fit of madness, they decided to revolt against a benevolent king. And this is far, far from the truth. I mean, I'm not here to tell you the story of my father, but my father came from like almost peasant stock. I wouldn't, they had their own land, but they would only eat if they had their crop would come up. It's almost like a peasant style living. And in order for him to have basic education and to put himself through university, since the age of 11, he had worked full time in the summers, and even sometime during it. So this idea that there was a benevolent dictator, the benevolent even king, even a benevolent dictator, was an outright lie. The revolution was a necessity, and it had a really good message, and it was overtaken. I'm going to I'm going to stop going on about this, but what I would say, my reading of what has happened and what might happen, is that at the moment it feels like the Trump regime has backed off, and they are interested in some sort of a negotiation process. This might last 1 year, 6 months, or it might last 5 years. So from a kind of an external factor, that's what's going on. But from and Iranian people have a tradition of demonstrating, retreating, energizing again. Like any other dictatorship, you need to retreat. You need to recognize that you have failed, you have lost a lot of bodies, and you need to regroup. And that happens in Iran quite often, that people go back and regroup. However, at the moment, it has been quite vicious. I was yesterday, a friend of mine was in a meeting with a prominent Iranian reformist. So he is still part of the system. He is not outside of the regime, but he was doing a talk on Zoom, I think. And then in the middle of that talk, he said, "Oh, I'm afraid security services are here. I need to go and speak to them. If it's okay, I will come back." And he didn't come back. He got arrested. And then the news of his arrest was all over the media. And this is what they're doing to their own people. So they're doubling down. There are there are executions of many, many people, and these are happening. And it's just horrific. It's just horrific. They are trying to create an atmosphere of terror and fear so that people don't demonstrate. I don't think that will work because people are pretty much at the stage where they don't have anything to lose. It might work for a few months or even a year, but it won't work forever. And I think this is a time for reflecting and thinking. And I really sincerely hope it's a time for the left to reflect. This is a good time for the left in the UK to reflect on, yes, we do not want our main job, as I see it, and I'm speaking now as a British person rather than as an Iranian, as a lefty British person living in the UK. I see my main job as fighting the crippling sanctions that are stopping people from from moving forward, because when you're hungry and then you don't have space to think, and you might, I would not be surprised if some Iranian people, and they do say, some Iranians do say, we've had enough, any change is better than these people. And that's a time when you really have to worry. Any change is not better than this regime, because any change could end up Libya, any change could end up Iraq, any change could be Syria. And in Libya, what was really interesting to me, I mean, it's a tragedy. You look, I don't know whether people have been following the news of Saiful Islam Gaddafi's death in Libya in the last couple of days. Over 1 million people attended his funeral. And I think that tells you something about the failure of the West and about the failure of I don't know. I can't remember what the Blair era during Bosnia called it. Uh, ethical interventionism. I mean, to be fair, Trump and Starmer and co don't even pretend to be ethical and interventionists. They're quite happy to say, no, we want the oil, and that's what we're doing. But even if you go as far as ethical interventionism, Libya and Afghanistan were under those kinds of under those kinds of umbrella groups of ethical interventionism. And look at what is happening now. You have a Taliban in power, and the West is more or less wanting to negotiate and do business as usual with them. So this is not what I want for Iran, and that's what we need to resist really hard. But as a left, we need to do better. We really need to do a lot better for solidarity. We have failed in terms of solidarity with the Iranian people. And we have allowed fascistic, um, pro Israel, pro American intervention, pro Iranian, previous Iranian kingdoms to take over the narrative. And I think that's something that we should take on board and think about how we are going to deal with that. Because unfortunately, we are clear and that's not just for Iran, it's for other places as well, because we now are clear that the era of law and order, even Carney announced it publicly, that the era of law and order, international rule of law is over. And the left really needs to think about what its response will be when they are in a situation that they have a brutal regimes inside countries, and then the West would like to attack them. And that balance is not an easy one, but it's something that we really need to think very carefully about. I'm going to stop there because I think probably, to be honest, Hamid will say something a lot more interesting than me. So I'll stop.
Thanks very much indeed, Aghileh. Yeah, I think what you've said is absolutely on the money. I mean, you know you must have family there, and so you know what you're talking about. But I'm going to bring in Hami, and you call him Hami. I'm going to bring Hami in now to hear what because you said he has a more recent experience of Iran. So I'm going to bring Hami in now to talk to us.
Yeah, thank you. Do you have my voice in a clear way? Okay. I think that if we want to understand the situation in Iran, we need to have a sort of contextual understanding of the history of the Islamic Republic from its very first days that it started to suppress and repress any sort of movement in Iran. I mean, the movement of the people in Kurdistan, the movement of the people in Turkmen Sahara, and also in the Khuzestan province, mainly Arab ethnic groups, called mainly socialist activists in Iran during the 1980s. And also the chain murders of Iranian intellectuals. Again, most of them were people with leftist tendencies. Uh, and also the waves of suppressing uprisings that has been caused by structural adjustments from the. Then we have had like several uprisings since the structural adjustment policies started in after war Iran, in post-war Iran. Uh, and I mean, one of them were like in Slamshah, the other was in Qazvin, the other was in Mashhad, and all of them were suppressed during the period that Rafsanjani was in power as the president. And also we had the Green Movement, we had the students movement, and several of them. And these movements sometimes were mainly having political demands, but sometimes they were driven by economic forces. For example, unemployment, inflation, and this has been continued up to now. What always the Western media and also some leftist campus groups has understood of these movements was that they are mainly demanding political freedom. I'm not saying that these movements never had a portion of their population to be concerned about political freedoms, but we also had like economic and class demands that have been neglected by many leftist groups. For example, those uprisings that happened during the Rafsanjani government, they were mainly driven by economic demands and class demands, or the recent movements that we had in uh, 17 and also we had in 19 were also a movement with economic demands and class demands, and they were mainly happened in poor neighborhoods, poor cities, and among the minorities. So this is, I think that having this context in mind is quite important because we need to understand that the people are fed up in terms of the economic condition and also in terms of cutting the welfare system has been cut like constantly since Rafsanjani's government in Iran post-war. So this is one of the things that I wanted to mention. And adding to that, we have many discriminative policies inside Iran. For example, many of us know that the steel and metal industries need water. But because the sea is in the south of Iran and it is mainly populated by ethnic and religious minorities, the government didn't build up the factories there. They built up the factories in mainly Fars and Shia cities. And that is causing like taking water from the mountains that is supposed to like be used for local people in the middle of desert. And then you will have environmental collapse. And for example, Khuzestan is one of the provinces in Iran, and it has like the biggest rivers in Iran. But now those rivers are being like in crisis because the source, the water from the source is taken in the middle of desert, to be used for the industries. And this is one of the issues. Or you might have heard about the Urumia Lake. It is like the water sources are being used for industrial agriculture. And so there is no water for the people and also for the lake. So these are like quite discriminatory policies. And in terms of like having access to education, we also have discriminatory policies. It is not something very direct, but if you look at in Iran to enter to university, students need to pass an entrance exam. And the first 3,000 people in the ranking are from the first decile of or the first two deciles of the classes in the country, which means that the more a person is richer, their children has better chance to enter good universities. And if somebody is from like a very poor family, while education for up till high school is free, it doesn't have any quality. So they fail to get a good result in the for the entrance exam of the university. So they end up in like somewhere very low quality education for university. So and these are like very real experiences of the people when they see there is no water, the air is polluted. And I understand that part of these issues are being caused by sanctions, but if we see the condition inside the country in terms of, for example, the embezzlement that is happening, or in terms of other restrictive and discriminatory policy, we cannot only blame the sanctions. And then if we also see the living condition of the rich who have direct or indirect affiliations or ideological affiliations with the government, and with the state, we all and IRGC, we will find that the way that they are exploiting the economic system is also one of the contributors to the bad economic situation in Iran. And then we also have other things that has actually nothing to do with sanctions. For example, imposing hijab or having discriminatory gendered policies against women in Iran. They don't have anything to do with sanctions. I mean, it is not the result of a sanction that they kill a young woman in custody because of not having a proper hijab. So this is one of the other issues that we need to bear in mind, that many of the social and political freedoms in Iran are being restricted. And this is also causing issues for the people, and many people do not like these discriminatory policies. Uh, when it comes to the movement that is currently happening in Iran, unfortunately, I'm not very optimistic. And this is because the way that Reza Pahlavi intervened, and also the way that external forces like Israel and United States intervened, actually made the situation quite difficult for people. And there are like quite few reasons for that. We know that uh, people, by their own instinct, when they see the state is suppressing them in a particular way, they will change their tactics and strategies. We saw this in the Jina uprising in Iran. People went to mass demonstrations when they found that, okay, this is being suppressed heavily. They started a smaller and decentralized demonstration. When they saw that police is coming into the neighborhoods, they started to write slogans on the walls during the night. When they see that streets in the night were being patrolled by police, they started to make a small neighborhood discussion groups. So there are several different strategies that people adopt based on the situation. But when Reza Pahlavi comes and say, I have 50,000 people inside the armed forces, and they have joined me. And when he comes and says, if they cut internet, we have hundreds of thousands Starlink internet receivers in Iran that would uh, make access to internet possible. And also there is the international TV, Iran International TV, which will be used as a way of communication with you. Then people would change their strategies because they would rely without, I mean, because ordinary people, they don't think like ideologically, or they don't know anything about the dialectic materialism, or these sort of things. They're like ordinary people want to live, and they will look at somebody who says that I'm trying to lead, I have the will to lead you through this path to changing or overthrowing the regime. And that person gives promises that are not right, that are not true. And people don't know this. People just rely on that and change their strategies and rely on him and what he said. And then they go to the street, and then they will find themselves alone without any sort of support, without any sort of organization, without anything. And then, it is like quite interesting. If you look at the Iran International TV website and also programs, the first day, people went to the street after the call of Reza Pahlavi. There were like lots of killings, and many videos were sent to Iran International TV. They published those videos the day after uh, in their English website, but they didn't cover any of them in their Farsi social media, in their Farsi website, and also in their Farsi satellite TV. And we believe that this is because they didn't want the Iranian people know the massacre happened. So, because if people know that, they might not come to the street. And this would affect and influence negatively the legitimacy of Reza Pahlavi, because they were claiming that people came into the street because of the call that is issued by Reza Pahlavi. So I think that these sorts of interventions, and also there were like tweets from Mossad saying that we have agents, we are supporting people not from the distance, but we have people in the field. And these sorts of things make some people do not go to the demonstrations anymore, gives the legitimacy to the Iranian regime to suppress heavier the demonstrations. And also it has, sorry, I have forgot that the word in English, but we call it something, it literally translates into flag effect, which means that inside armed forces, when they realize that there is a sort of external intervention, uh, their moral and unity would be strengthened. And this is also something that happened, because when Mossad or Israel and United States say that we are supporting, we have people in the field, then many of the armed forces who might be hesitant about suppressing people would say themselves, okay, this is something uh, conducted by an external force. And so, because of the feeling about they might have about their own country, they would think, okay, these people are not ordinary people, they are agents. And these all of things, I think that actually negatively influenced the movement in Iran, and and also it has caused lots of fragmentation among the society, because now many people are trying to defend Reza Pahlavi, many other are critical of him. And so the actual cause has been forgotten, and people have started to fight with each other in families, in social media, about Pahlavi or about any other group. And I think that this is not something that would be very good, considering that the one who has a media apparatus is actually Reza Pahlavi, and this media is helping him to misrepresent the movement. So inside the country, there are these issues, and then outside the countries, people are becoming, I mean, the international solidarity has become some sort of difficulty for us, as Aghileh said, because we have these monarchist group carrying the Israeli flag, uh, um, which influences negatively the legitimacy of the movement people have inside Iran. And yeah, that's it. But I would be very happy if there are any particular question that you think I need to address or I might be able to address.
Thank you very much indeed. It sounds as if there's many problems. Have Can I ask a question? Can the can the people of Iran, have they got the power to vote out the theocratic regime? Is there any electoral way that that can happen? That's my question. And Mike has got his hand up. I'll bring Mike in because he'd like to ask a question as well.
Yes. So it's a question to you both, really. And I mean, it pertains to the intervention of Israel and the USA and to the left here, because anybody who was on the last Gaza-Palestine demo on the 31st of January, we will have experienced at a certain point at the bottom of the Strand we came across the usual small number of Zionists and far right, sort of British fascists, uh, accompanied by a ginormous Iranian flag. There didn't seem to be numbers to kind of complement the flag. It was just a flag and perhaps one or two Pahlavi supporters. There didn't seem to be much more, but the Zionists obviously thought they'd really got us on a difficult one there. Um, and I mean, that I just thought, well, okay, guys, failed. However, the British left has a real problem, I think, or sections of it do. Fast forward to this last week, and I'm in Ipswich in Suffolk, local Gaza sort of picket vigil outside a local hospital, which we do every fortnight. And first of all, a couple of people came by, probably stage managed a bit, saying, well, yes, of course, there are issues, but what about Iran? One of them claimed to be an Iranian exile, and they didn't like to appear that they knew each other, but I think it was sort of synchronized in some way, and they tried to give us a hard time. But then one of the people in the local Palestine group, who I have huge respect for generally, quite a young North African guy, he's really well read, really knowledgeable, excellent speaker. He, just talking to him immediately afterwards, I was really shocked because he said, yeah, they killed 500 Iranian police. And he said, well, you know what they look like, you know how well armed they are. So there they were out of control. And what he was saying was, this was an entirely kind of, an externally created disturbance, uprising, provoked by America and Israel, and those people deserved everything they should get. So he was solidly on the side of the regime in Iran, and I found that truly shocking. But not surprising, given that we have, we have and have had Assad apologists, and we've had issues about that, in the British left, in the English left in particular. And we have similar kind of issues that because he's up against NATO, Putin must be a very lovely man. So it's not unusual, but I just wanted to get your take on the British left and how to slap them. And, this simple idea that your enemy's enemy has to be your friend. Well, it ain't like that. And, life is more complicated than that. And we have to have better politics than that, rather than this simple, stupid, knee-jerk stuff. Just a postscript, by the way. I totally admire the wonderful. I've seen quite a few Iranian films, and most recently it was Just an Accident, which I saw twice. It was so good. But I'm just the difficulties to even make a film in Iran, which is why so many of them are in cars and taxis. But they're incredible. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mike. Yeah, we really got to do away with that. My enemy's enemy is my friend nonsense. Steve, I'm going to bring Steve in now.
Yeah, thanks to both of you really in bringing lots of things together into one place. And it also for me, filled in some gaps, but also reinforced things I was already kind of thinking about, but just elaborated on it. I mean, I was recently arguing, and this is a thing that Mike has taken up in the English left, and I'll say English left. I'm going to talk about Scots and Welsh. In the English left, we have a tradition of what might be called loosely Stalinism. And so we as Republicans, and we're socialists as well, but we as Republicans have put all our emphasis on the question of democracy, the importance of it, and democratic revolution. It's not just that we're against the royalists because we call ourselves Republicans, although we are here and anywhere else for that matter. It's totally out of what we'd never go along with that. But our emphasis is really so much on the democracy, on democracy. That's the driving through the democracy, the people, and through the people, the working class. Now, the one way of looking at the world, and I've argued a little bit with Chris Williamson recently as well on this, but some people on the left see, I call them imperialists, because they see the world divided into two imperialists. There's the great Satan, America, Israel, UK, etc. They're in these imperialists' view, they're the imperialists. And then there's China and Russia and Iran and North Korea and all these other people. These are somehow anti-imperialists. And so we have to, so if this is the only choice that you've got in the world between these two sets of state regimes fighting each other, then you have to take sides. And obviously you don't want to side with Israel and you don't want to side with America or Britain. So therefore you side with Iran. And Chris Williamson argues that, and other people argue that as well. Coming from that, I think, not necessarily the Stalinists particularly, but coming from that sort of tradition. Whereas we as Republicans, we emphasize. So, by the way, it means these people end up being apologists for Assad, Putin, the regimes in Iran and other places. They can't help themselves, and all this time they're making excuses as to why. Well, they might be terrible, but they're not as bad as the Americans and Israelis are. Whereas we as Republicans come from the point of view of the people and popular struggle. Now, of course, we understand imperialism too in all of that, and democratic revolution. And he reminded me the history of Iran as creating democratic revolutions. 1979 was a democratic revolution, even though it was a counter-revolution. I mean, if we think of our own one in 1649, we had a democratic revolution, then Cromwell took over. So quite often the counter-revolution comes in the revolution. You end up with something much nastier than you even imagined at the beginning, even though it was progressive at the beginning, even though it was liberationist movement at the beginning. So I think going through the sources, I think, was very good of the grievances that cause this democratic aspiration. They can be class grievances, they can be economic grievances. They can be, as you pointed out, some things coming from sanctions, but a lot of them nothing to do with sanctions. And I think that's a very good point that you that you highlighted, because it's easy to, we over here, when if we're on these one of the imperialists, we think, oh well, the reason that that's happening is that Trump has made it happen by putting these sanctions on people, and then they've done it as a trick to get the Iranian people to rebel by forcing it. Now, obviously, that's part of the story, but it's quite clearly only part of the story. And if you only think economics instead of freedom, liberty, democracy, and things like that, then that's what you come to. But then I think a point was important, really good, important, that we have to understand, that you highlighted for me. I hadn't particularly thought about it. Within the popular movement, within the democratic revolution, if you like, there are reactionary populisms going on. And those reactionary populisms in this case are the royalists, and they are the CIA, and they are Israel, etc. And they help each other. The reactionaries defending the regime and the reactionaries in the popular opposition absolutely help each other. They provide each other with excuses. We have to kill everybody because they're full of Israeli agents, etc. So they help each other. And so obviously you want a democratic movement, a movement for a democratic secular I'm going to Israel, movement for a democratic secular Iran has got to be what we are fighting for, etc. And we have to get that own. This is part of, for us. I mean, we're not in Iran, so we don't know the details, but we are fighting the same battle here in a different way, in a different situation. We are fighting for a democratic republic here. And we're fighting against those kind of Stalinist ideas that don't give much value for democracy in your party, in the Labour Party, in all these places. We're having a similar parallel, if you like, struggle. Don't give up fighting for democracy in your party. I'll just throw that out as a little you always fight as you can. Oh, I'm going to stop there. I mean, but a great analysis, and one I share. Yeah, I think we as Republicans share that analysis. And republicanism is anti-imperial. It's genuine anti-imperialism because it's about the people, and it's about the working class, and it's about freedom. And that's where we are. We are the only anti-imperialists, really. And so we don't want any sanctions. We don't want any bombing, and we don't think Trump's going to. I mean, we don't. Any of these people that might be people might be persuaded are the allies of the Iranian people are not the allies of the Iranian people. They come out, we're going to bomb them, then they don't turn up, because at the end of the day, all the imperialists, they want a better deal with the Iranian regime, just like Trump did in Venezuela. Just give us a better deal for more money, more oil, whatever it is. That's all they're really interested in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I thought, Hamid, you're describing how they're moving water away from where people need it to industries to make rich people richer, I imagine. And also your education situation. That is so like that here. I mean, it's no different in the UK. 7% of all youngsters go to independent schools, but they end up 60 to 70% of all the top jobs in the professions. So we've got exactly the same problem here. It's a class problem. And I am a firm believer that if we did away with independent schooling in the UK, it would have such a beneficial effect on society as a whole. People would understand each other better. But of course, that isn't what the ruling class want. They want what you're describing, divide and rule. People starting to argue with it. You were describing that. People arguing with each other now, even within families and so on. And that's exactly what they want to happen. So your problem, the problems that the Iranians have got are the problems that we've got. We haven't got obviously we haven't got the repression that you have, but we have got the same class problems and economic problems as well. So I was really interested to hear about that, Hami. So I'm going to go back to our two speakers now.
Regarding the voting, there is a vicious cycle in the constitution. So it is not actually possible to do so because the fundamentals of the regime can't be changed. So there should be a supreme leader always there. And there also should be this guardian council, which is supposed to to guard the Islamic Sharia law and the constitution. So as long as these two elements exist, then the system can change, and these two elements cannot be changed at all. And then regarding this contribution about the campus politics, I think that it's very important, and I agree with everything is said. Uh, I find the problem mainly in the level of the analysis, both in the Cold War era and also in the post-Cold era that can be characterized as a globalizing world. The international relation as a discipline, I know that there are like progressive tendencies and theories there, but it is mainly analyzing things based on the nation states. So this assumes, firstly, that states are representing the nations, and within each state there is only one main nation. There isn't ethnic diversity, and there are ethnic groups, different ethnic groups. And then there are like two or maybe three or whatever camps or sides in the struggle. So the actual struggle is between the states, between the nation states. But in fact, as said, I think that we need to consider the class element and also the popular movements. And if we consider those things, then the way that we analyze and see things would be very different. If socialism and if left, generally speaking, is about social justice, then we cannot miss any sort of injustice in any level.
Mm.
And the actual level that people are experiencing the injustice is within the countries, also influenced by the way that international relations are being constructed. And I think that maybe it would be good that I write a few lines from a statement issued by Pakhshan Azizi. Pakhshan is an Iranian Kurdish political prisoner, and she has been sentenced to death. And United States Department of State issued a solidarity statement with her, and I just read her response to the Department of State. In response to the statement of the U.S. Department of State apparently issued in defense of me, I declare that if the United States government truly adheres to human rights and humanist principles, it must, it must first abandon its aggression and crimes in the region, cease its overt support of genocide of the innocent people of Gaza, and end its years-long sanctions that have inflicted relentless economic hardship upon the oppressed and suffering people of this land. I'm an ordinary member of this society, a social worker whose field of work is with people and communities, not with the government and states, nor in their political activities or games, nor do I wish to take part in them. The people in the Middle East have been crushed under the economic and social pressures caused by the violative policies of the West, led by United States, and a century of colonialism and exploitation, and also by the conduct of the regional governments and states. So uh, this is something issued by someone who is under death sentence by the Islamic regime. And at the same time, it addresses the United States. It also addresses the internal suppression and oppression against people. And this is something that we need to bear in mind. And these voices, unfortunately, are not being represented in media. But these voices exist. These voices are part of the organized civil society in Iran. The people who activists who work with ordinary people. And I think that they are the best people who could lead us in terms of constructing a popular movement or strengthening the popular aspects of the movements, and also bringing back the class struggle into the table. Because I think one of the things that has been forgotten for long is the class struggle. And if we forgot the class struggle, at the end of the day, we will end up with some sort of understanding that Steve highlighted its problematic nature, that there is the thing between the states. There is one side, United States, UK, Israel, West, and the other side, China, Russia, Iran, and the rest. Yeah.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much indeed, Hami. Aghileh, over to you. We've got one more hand up. Can I just take John before you come back?
Yeah.
John, I'm just going to add you into the discussion here. John?
Right, thank you very much, Carol. Yes, thank you very much, Hamid, for the letter that you just wrote, read out. I would be very interested because I do believe that all these struggles are intertwined ultimately in knowing what I know that it's a time where there's very little space to be thinking about what might be considered other struggles, but the fact remains that the Kurdish people are suffering greatly at the moment because Israel, Turkey, the United States, and Islamic Jihad in Syria have basically eliminated the SDF, and they have retreated to the north to near the Turkish border. And so I wondered what was the strength of the solidarity with the Kurds amongst the Iranian left, the Iraqi left, and the Turkish left. I was in Turkey 2 years ago. I didn't see much sign of any solidarity with the Kurds in Istanbul, where I was. But I just wondered what the situation was with that. And secondly, I think that one of the problems with the issue of the lack of a proper solidarity movement with the Iranian people is this complication about the nuclear reactors, because many people on the left, probably the whole of the left, is very much against the proliferation of nuclear weapons. Having said that, there is an enormous amount of hypocrisy around the discussion of nuclear weapons in the world, and it's basically a club to protect those who have them at the moment and to stop anybody else from getting them. But putting that to one side, is there any way where we can get some kind of clarity on these two issues? And also on the issue of what proportion of the protests comes from a real opposition of Iranian people to the regime, and what proportion comes from the obvious intervention of Mossad and the CIA within those as well, and the absolute willingness of the United States to impose Pahlavi on the people of Iran, because I do think those questions, those three questions, are crucial to forming real solidarity, effective solidarity.
Absolutely, John. Yeah, really, really good questions. So I'm going to go back to Aghileh and then back to Hami because he didn't have that question before. Okay, thanks very much, John.
Um, So I think I will answer a bit of John's question because I don't know all of it, but I would say about I would say personally, given what is going on in Iran, given the economic pressures, given all sorts of other pressures that people are under, the majority of people demonstrating were ordinary Iranians. However, this is a big caveat for me, and I wouldn't be surprised if Hamid doesn't agree with me, is that I think there was a really big element of wanting to create damage and to create mayhem, to scare people, and this was a substantial element. It might not have been big in terms of numbers, but they did real damage. You could argue, which I would, is that, so to the comrade who told one of the speakers about the 500 police getting killed, I think that's probably about right. But the point is, if you have create a country that security is so lax for everybody, that 500 of your own guards are getting killed in a space of 2 nights, then you really need to question what is going on. What kind of an atmosphere have you created in this country? So, for instance, the killing of the Palestinian leader, I forgot his name, who died in Iran, who was killed in Iran. Hamid,
Uh,
huh?
the negotiator, he was negotiating this.
Yeah, Ismail Haniyeh.
Yeah.
Ismail Haniyeh's killing, he got killed. He was bombed in a place where only very senior security people have access to. The president of Iran got killed in a helicopter where, I'm sorry, these are things that the Iranian regime regard. I mean, even if you are pro the Iranian regime, you need to question what kind of a system, mafia system, are you running that in the highest echelons of power, you have people from Mossad, and so they are actually Khamenei is actually running scared in terms of his own life because they absolutely cannot trust anybody. This is the state of the country. And where do you have to get to have that kind of an environment? So I think that number of 500 is not incorrect. I wouldn't be surprised if it's even more than that or a little bit less than that. That wouldn't shock me remotely. But I would then question, where are we? What is the security? Basic security in this country is not being provided to the Iranian people. And this is a real issue. So that's what I would first of all say. But also in terms of sanctions, I would like to go back to the sanctions issue. To be honest, I personally oppose sanctions partly because of how difficult it makes the lives of ordinary Iranians. But broader than that, when people are so hungry, it's difficult for them to stand up for their own rights. And I think when people have a little bit of space to think, when I mean, you see it in England at the moment. I'm canvassing, and in areas where poverty is really bad. It's one of those, multi-occupancy households where there's loads of people, whatever. People are just not interested in engaging. People engage when they have a level of, they have some sort of a vested interest in society at a level. It doesn't have to be high, but it has to be something. And I think this applies to Iran. Sanctions, crippling sanctions, it stops people from engaging and wanting to fight for democracy, although they still do. But they have, so that's one thing I would say. But something that is slightly funny, but it's also has got a bigger purpose. During the 12-day war, Stop the War had organized a demo against the Israeli attack on Iran, which, I completely agreed with and I attended. But all the speakers, well, not all of the speakers, but most of the speakers had proper tanky credentials. So Andrew Murray, um, famous tanky who lives in a Scottish castle. To add, I mean, it's funny. It's funny if it wasn't so tragic. I don't think Andrew Murray should be speaking for Iran and the state of the left. The left is we have these self-selected leaders who speak on behalf of everybody. They attend every demo. They attend, like Palestine Solidarity campaign and all of the Palestine demos that I've attended, I don't ever stay for the speeches because the same people repeat the same mantras and you just think this is pointless. I'm not going to listen to this. And you actually almost feel like they actually quite like this to go on, this genocide to go on, than Palestine not to be free because they'll be jobless. I know this is a really unkind way to describe it, but it just gives you that sense that, what would they have to do in their lives? The likes of Andrew Murray, the likes of, I don't know, John Rees. What else would they have in their lives if they didn't have this stuff? And I know it sounds really uncomradely, but it is the state of the left in this country that is not allowed. And we have lots of really, whenever there are opportunities, there are lots of really young people with lots of energy, lots of things to say, lots of interesting stuff to say. And they should be allowed to speak. But that 500, the number of the dead, what your comrade said about the 7,000 people who died. I don't care, but if they were absolute criminals, in the same way that I don't care whether it's a Hamas person dying in Gaza or it's an ordinary Palestinian or whatever. I don't care. I don't care. They should not be killed. This is not how we deal with people in civilized society. And we should not be saying that this is not how we deal with people in England, because I suspect that very comrade would be up in arms if something like that happened in England. Because that's the equivalent of the Palestine Action people getting arrested. And what we don't find acceptable in our own country, we should not find acceptable in somebody else's land. And that's the bottom line of it. Anyway, I'll stop. Hamid, do you want to go back to that question?
I'm just going to say, absolutely, absolutely. I totally agree with everything you've just said. Thank you very much. Hamid, if you'd like to come back again.
Regarding the security forces or police being killed, when the November 2019 movement happened, which we call it the Bloody November, in many neighborhoods in poor areas, many people have been killed by security forces, and many people have been arrested. And some of the comrades who were in prison at that time, who saw newly arrested people from these poor neighborhoods, and they started to talk with them. And one of the things that people who were arrested at that movement said to our comrades were that, okay, the next time if a movement happens, we will beat security forces because we were demonstrating peacefully. They attacked us, they killed us, they beat us. So the next time we will come with plan. If they attack us, we will beat them. So we need to bear this in mind that people come to the streets peacefully. They are being killed and attacked. So the next time, it is a natural reaction. They would naturally say themselves, okay, we need to be organized. So if they beat us, they will beat them as well. So this is one of the things. I'm not saying that Israel does not have any hand in these things in these violence. But we also need to bear this in mind. Also, sometimes the government itself promotes violence so it can legitimize its reactionary, repressive policies. And I think these points are quite important. And this is why, I mean, the Kurdish parties in Iran, they are not legal, but they were quite mature during this movement and also during the Jina uprising. Because, they have some military bases hidden in the mountains, both in Kurdish area in Iraq and in Turkish Kurdistan and also in the Kurdistan inside Iran. But they never used any sort of military. Even the Iranian state attacked their civilian camps with missiles, but they didn't respond anything during the Jina uprising. And then during this uprising, they only issued general call for a strike, not for a street demonstration, because they knew that the Iranian government, when there isn't proper organization before the start of the movement, and when the movement just starts without any sort of um, mm, organized plan, then the government would easily suppress it. So it is not wise to just call people into the street without any plan. So they only called for a strike. And that is what distincts them from a self-appointed person like Reza Pahlavi, who just calls people into the streets without even letting them know, if you're arrested, please do not sign any investigation paper that is not filled by yourself. Because one of the strategies that the Iranian state used, they force people to sign blank papers and then they will write whatever they want on it. And then they accuse people of like very serious crimes. But even Reza Pahlavi, he has a billion-dollar television station, and he even does not try to educate people, saying that, okay, please do not sign this. I mean, these are very simple things that in any movement, if you have money, if you have a satellite TV and means of communicating with ordinary people, you need to do these basic things. But he even did not do that. Uh, and that there is one thing that I missed, and it is like I think that it would be very interesting for all of you, is that we had a big wave of anti-leftist propaganda since 2022 after the Jina uprising. Because during the Jina uprising, the leftist politics were becoming more and more popular among the ordinary people, both the working class and also the lower middle class and the middle class in Iran. And one of the things that both the Pahlavi camp and the Islamic Republic were agreed on that. And they actually, I'm not saying they worked together on that, but they followed a similar strategy, which was anti-leftist propaganda. So Iran International were used by Pahlavist people for anti-leftist propaganda, and then the Iranian national TV, official national TV, were used, and there were like several programs weekly criticizing leftists because of like making crisis in the world, and it is like sometimes spreading misinformation and disinformation. And I think that is something very interesting in terms of the rise of the anti-leftist politics in Iran, because I need to admit that there is this rise. And if we do not understand that, we might end up in missing the rise of a sort of no fascist uh, politics in Iran. That is like, for me, it is quite scary. Not because I think that people are turning into fascist ideologies, but because we have missed it, we didn't get that this is coming. And this scares me that if we do not, as Iranian activists, we do not get that this is coming, then it means that we have lost sort of connection with the politics that is happening in the field. And we have been like isolated ourselves in our own circles without knowing that other media, how they are working, how they are following strategies to promote their own politics. So I think that this is also something important. And but regarding the Syrian Kurdistan, unfortunately, I don't have mm, enough information, but I think that one of the things that we all need to do is to show solidarity because, you know, the the Kurdish people in Syria have been, I know that there are criticism against them when there was the war in Syria because they accepted the support from United States and they worked with United States. But I think that we also need to bear this in mind that some groups of Kurdish people, particularly Izadi people, uh, w- were being like massacred, and even there are some analyses that call the situation genocide of Izadi people, and many of their girls and women were taken as slaves by the ISIS.
Mm.
And so I mean that they were in the danger of genocide. So I'm not judging that. I think that it is very difficult to judge uh, people living in that situation to accept support from any party that could because that support could help them to defend themselves. It I mean this is like something very complicated. But now I think that, and the other thing is I think when the left doesn't show solidarity, then the opportunity would be given to the governments and states to follow their own reactionary policies and doing like providing some basic supports that would help them to promote their own policies.
I,
Yeah,
I,
thank
to
you.
I totally agree with you. I read a book called The Daughters of Kobani and how those women, those amazing women, fought ISIS and won. I remember, and people, as you say, Hami, the left is condemning those people because they took help from the US. They couldn't have driven ISIS out without their air support. And those women would have been sold into slavery and beheaded. They were even beheading women that were dead. I mean, these people are unspeakable. And so I absolutely agree with you. We can't, we have to support those people. They were fighting for their lives, for their culture. And they took help, as you say, Hamid, they took help wherever they could get it. And I hear my leftist colleagues saying, well, of course, what can they expect? They took, help from the US, and those people were fighting literally for their lives. And we must show solidarity. I absolutely agree with you. Well, just thank you. This has been so enlightening. This has been absolutely marvelous. I've learned so much. And I've learned that the Iranian people are up against many of the things that we're up against ourselves. But you have this terrible constitution where, from what you've described, Hami, where people can't vote them out. They can't vote out the mullahs. They can't vote out the theocratic state because of the constitution. So you have to, we're trying to do. We're trying to get a constitution. We haven't even got one. I mean, your one sounds absolutely terrible, but we don't even have one in the UK. And so you need a new one, obviously, and we need one to start with. So we're actually fighting for the same things, aren't we? Constitutions that protect people, that give people hope, life, shelter, protection, food, medicines. We need a constitution, and it seems like you do too, that guarantees all of those things that people need to the people. So thank you very much indeed. It's been wonderfully enlightening for me, and I'm sure it has for everybody else. So thank you so much for coming tonight and
Thank you for
speaking to us.
inviting us, Carol.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. And so, as I usually say at the end of a meeting, enjoy the rest of your evening if you can, after hearing what we've heard. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody,
Bye.
and bye.
Thank you. Bye.